One of the prevailing issues in our country when we talk about public education is equity. Every child in this country deserves to attend a high-performing school. And while we have 50.4 million children in this country who attend our public schools, and the dropout rate has been reduced from 10% in the year 2000 to 6.4% in the year 2012, we have more than 1 million children in our country that are dropouts in the wealthiest country on the planet. There was a study that was conducted that also shows that there is a relationship between the level of teacher engagement and those of their students, and thus it impacts student achievement. So if that is true, I want to examine several key questions with you this afternoon. The first being, can one teacher make a difference? Well, I know that we have all had teachers who have prompted us to live our best lives, and for me, that was Mrs. Poe. She was my 7th grade teacher. She was no nonsense. She had high expectations, and she demanded excellence. And you could hear a pin drop in Mrs. Poe's room. Well, to our dismay, one day as we were doing our work in Mrs. Poe's room, we heard a student out in the hallway, and he was using every combination of expletive that you could imagine. Some that I had never heard of, and I thought I grew up in a tough neighborhood, but I had never heard these combinations of words. Mrs. Poe, she walked over to the door, and we said, oh my God, he's gonna get it now. But instead, she did something that surprised all of us, that we were not prepared for, that ultimately transformed our lives. She called the young man over to her, and she took his face, and she put it in her hand. And she said, has anyone ever told you how beautiful you are? She said, I am expecting greatness from you. And he pulled back his face, and he said, get off of me. You ain't none of my teacher. And she said, you're absolutely correct. And she said, therein lies the problem. She said, let's start by fixing that. She took him by the arm. She said, class, follow me. She marched us down 3 flights of stairs to the counselor's office. When she came back out of the counselor's office, he was in our line. She marched us back up 3 flights of stairs to room 302. She said, please have a seat right here. She said, you've joined our class just in time. She said, we're working on vocabulary words. And she said, I know you love vocabulary. She said, because I heard all of the wonderful words that you were using out in the hall. That moment changed his life. That moment. And fast forward 15 years later, that young man has a master's in electrical engineering, and he is working for one of the top Fortune 500 companies in our nation. I often wondered, what is it that prompted Mrs. Poe to draw a line in the sand? Why did she take personal responsibility for a student that wasn't assigned to her? Over the last 15 years of my leadership journey, I've had the opportunity to observe and evaluate over 300 teachers, and I found that the ones that were highly effective had 3 attributes in common. They had curiosity, they had courage, and they had skill. They had the curiosity to ask what if, they had the courage to look for a problem that they could solve, and they also had the skill. They were willing to cultivate the skill needed to ensure that they could solve the problem. Well, I'm so grateful that I had that experience with Mrs. Poe, because she taught me that courage demands that you step out and you find a way, that courage is an open rebuke to the status quo. We know that all great teachers have a lasting impact. And I love one of the quotes by the New Teacher Project that says that our current teacher retention crisis is not just about retaining enough teachers, but it's about retaining the right teachers. Bill Saunders out of the University of Tennessee did a study where he wanted to examine the relationship between teacher effectiveness and student achievement. And what Saunders found is that when children had 3 effective teachers in a row, that they performed at the 96th percentile on the Tennessee mathematics assessment. In contrast, when children, starting in 3rd grade, had 3 low-performing teachers in a row, they performed at the 44th percentile on the same test, and these are presumably children that have the same skill and ability. So then I asked the question, well, is it the children that fail, or is it the systems which educate them that fail them? And that was a question very oftentimes that Marva Collins asked. Very early in my career, I had the opportunity to work for Marva Collins, the famed educator out of Chicago who started Westside Prep, and she challenged the systems that educate our children. Many years ago, 60 Minutes did an interview with Mrs. Collins. And during that interview, one of the students that was highlighted was Erica. Erica was a student that had come to her who had been labeled severely learning disabled by her school district. Mrs. Collins said to her mom, she said, bring her to me 1 hour before school, 1 hour after school, every single day. 2 years later, she was reading 3 years above grade level. And she went on to graduate from college, summa cum laude. Another one of my champions of hope is Marion Wright Edelman. I had the opportunity to work at the Children's Defense Fund. And during that time, Marion Wright Edelman stepped up and she challenged systems and said that we must address the issues of poverty that exist in our nation. She asked the question, who will be a voice for the voiceless? And she courageously answered that call. Well, we've talked about individual game changers, but what about communities? I want to find out, can a community ensure that all of its children are career and college ready? I was appointed to be superintendent of one of the most vulnerable communities in the state of Michigan, and it's the first school district to ever be taken over by the state. There have been 12 superintendents there in 11 years, and 95% of our kids live below poverty. But we said, we want to send them to college. We didn't have the money to start an early college program. 70% of our parents had not graduated from college. But we went to the churches, and for 6 months, we went to every church. And within 2 years, all of our churches adopted 300 kids and decided to pay their tuition through the early college program for them to get their associate's degree. Well, when we first came up with that idea, we were laughed to scorn. And we decided, after going to 12 colleges and universities, we were going to wait for the one yes, and we waited for one yes, and our early college program, it was born. I want you to know that courage finds a way, and you have to be willing to stand on 100 no's to get to one yes. Well, you ask, what happened to those 300 students that were a part of our program? Well, all 300 of them graduated with their high school diploma and their Associate of Arts degree and started college as juniors. 298 of them went on to get their bachelor's degrees. 150 of them got their master's. 11 of them graduated from law school, and 10 of them graduated from medical school. Don't tell me it can't be done. One of the things that I want you to know is that we all have the ability to make a difference, and if that community can do it, any community could do it. So now, I say to you, maybe the change that you're looking for, maybe the change that you're looking to make, maybe we're waiting on you to make it. In Mrs. Collins' classroom one day, I watched her teach a lesson, and I was just in awe. And at the end of that lesson, I said to her, I want to be just like you. And she looked at me with such disappointment. And she said to me, if you need to be me and I need to be you, then one of us is unnecessary. She said, each one of us has our own race to run. And if you don't run your race and you just spend your time imitating me, then the world will miss out on the uniqueness of what you have to offer. Well, that message resonated with me, and so now I share that message with you. Each one of you has a unique contribution to make, and courage is calling your name. I believe that it was Joseph Campbell who said that one of the greatest joys and pleasures and gifts that we have is being who we are. That is our greatest joy. So I say to you that courage demands that you act. And it is for each one of us to step up and take courage. And it is then and only then will each one of us be able to say that we will live up to our nation's creed, that we find these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. It is only when we take courage that we change systems. I want each one of you to take courage. I want each one of you to use your curiosity, and I want you to use your skill to solve some of the most intractable problems, because there are individuals that are waiting on you to create their next turning point. Thank you.